I pulled off the highway and into the rest stop, my eyelids heavy with exhaustion. It was nearly 2 a.m., and I had been driving for hours trying to make it to my sister's place by morning. The rest stop was dimly lit, with only a couple of other cars parked in the lot. I figured I could close my eyes for just a few minutes, maybe grab a quick coffee from the vending machine to keep me going. As I stepped out of my car, the cool night air sent a shiver down my spine. The rest stop seemed eerily quiet, with only the distant sound of traffic on the highway breaking the silence. I made my way towards the restroom building, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Inside, the restroom was empty. The white tiles were grimy and the mirrors were streaked with grime. I quickly used the facilities and splashed some water on my face, trying to wake myself up. As I was drying my hands, I heard the restroom door creak open behind me. I glanced up, expecting to see another weary traveler, but instead, I saw a man standing in the doorway. He was tall and gaunt, with stringy hair and a long, unkempt beard. His clothes were dirty and tattered, like he had been living on the streets, but it was his eyes that caught my attention. They were wild and unfocused, darting around the room. "Hey there," he said, his voice raspy and low. "You got any spare change?" I shook my head, feeling a sense of unease wash over me. "Sorry, I don't have any cash on me." The man took a step closer, his eyes boring into mine. "Come on, man. I know you got something. Just a few bucks. That's all I need." I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. "I said I don't have anything. Please, just leave me alone." But the man kept coming, his movements erratic and jerky. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something shiny. A knife glinting under the harsh bathroom lights. "Give me your wallet," he growled, his voice taking on a menacing tone. "Now!" I felt a surge of panic, my mind racing with possibilities. I could try to run, but he was blocking the only exit. I could try to fight, but he had a weapon and I was unarmed. My only option was to comply and hope that he would take what he wanted and leave. With shaking hands, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. The man snatched it from my grasp, his eyes gleaming with a desperate hunger. He rifled through the contents, pulling out the few bills I had inside. "That's it?" he snarled, his face twisting with anger. "You lying to me, boy?" I shook my head frantically, my voice trembling. "That's all I have, I swear. Please, just take it and go." For a moment, the man just stared at me, his eyes filled with a wild, unpredictable rage. Then, without warning, he lunged forward, the knife slashing through the air. I felt a searing pain in my arm as the blade sliced through my skin. I cried out, stumbling backwards and crashing into the sink. The man was on me in an instant, his weight pinning me down, the knife pressed against my throat. "You think you can just come in here and lie to me?" he hissed, his breath hot and rancid against my face. "You think you're better than me?" I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The cold metal of the knife bit into my skin, and I could feel a trickle of blood running down my neck. I closed my eyes, waiting for the inevitable. But then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the weight lifted off me. I heard the sound of footsteps, running away, the restroom door slamming shut. I lay there for a moment, gasping for air, my heart hammering in my chest. When I finally managed to pull myself up, I saw that I was alone. The man was gone, and so was my wallet. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, my voice trembling as I told the operator what had happened. I never saw the man again, but that night at the rest stop has haunted me ever since. The scar on my arm is a constant reminder of how quickly a situation can turn from bad to worse, and how vulnerable we all are when we're out there on the road, alone in the darkness. I pulled off the highway into the dimly lit rest area, my eyes heavy with fatigue from the long drive. It was after midnight, and I still had hours to go before reaching my destination. The rest stop seemed deserted, with only a couple of other cars parked in the shadows. I figured I could close my eyes for a quick power nap before getting back on the road. As I reclined the driver's seat and started to drift off, a knock on my window jolted me awake. I sat up, heart pounding, to see a woman standing outside my car. She looked disheveled, her hair matted, and her clothes dirty. I cracked the window just an inch. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Please, my car won't start. Can you give me a jump?" Her voice was shaky, almost desperate. Something didn't feel right, but I didn't want to leave someone stranded. Against my better judgment, I agreed. "Okay, just let me pull up next to your car." She pointed to a beat-up sedan at the far end of the lot, away from the lights. As I pulled up beside it, I noticed the hood was already up. The woman appeared at my window again. "Pop your hood," she said, more of a demand than a request. I hesitated, a knot forming in my stomach. But I did as she asked, and got out to retrieve the jumper cables from my trunk. As I handed them to her, I saw a flicker of movement in the back seat of her car. A face in the window, pale and wide-eyed. It looked like a child. "Is someone else with you?" I asked, taking a step back. The woman's demeanor shifted. Her desperation turned to annoyance. "No, it's just me. Hurry up with those cables." But I was sure of what I'd seen. I glanced around the empty rest stop, a chill running down my spine. "Look, maybe we should just call for roadside assistance." Her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, her fingers ice cold. "I said hurry up," she hissed, her face inches from mine. Over her shoulder, I saw the rear car door crack open. Panic rising in my throat, I wrenched my arm free and stumbled backwards. "I'm sorry, I can't help you." My voice shook as I fumbled for my keys. The woman lunged at me, but I managed to slip back into my car and lock the doors. As I peeled out of the rest stop, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The woman was standing in the red glow of my taillights, watching me drive away. And next to her, illuminated for just a moment, was the small figure of a child. I didn't stop driving until the sun came up. To this day, I don't know what would have happened if I'd stayed a minute longer in that rest area. All I know is that every time I see a road sign for a rest stop, especially at night, a chill runs through me and my foot presses a little harder on the gas. I pulled into the rest stop just after 2 a.m. My eyelids were heavy and I could barely keep my head up after driving for 6 straight hours. I knew I needed to rest, even if just for a little while, before I ended up driving off the road. The rest area was dimly lit, with only a couple of flickering streetlights illuminating the parking lot. I didn't see any other cars, which wasn't surprising given the late hour. I parked in a spot near the restroom building, figuring I would use the facilities before trying to grab a quick nap in my car. As I stepped out into the cool night air, a shiver ran down my spine. It was eerily quiet, with only the distant sound of an occasional semi-truck roaring by on the highway. I hurried toward the restroom, suddenly feeling very alone and exposed in the empty lot. The restroom was just as deserted as the parking area. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered overhead, casting strange shadows on the tiled walls. I quickly did my business, the sound of the flushing toilet unnaturally loud in the stillness. As I washed my hands, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I glanced around nervously, but I was still alone. I practically jogged back to my car, fumbling with my keys as I tried to unlock the door. Just as I was about to climb in, I heard a voice from the shadows. "Excuse me, miss." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. A figure stepped out from behind the restroom building. It was a man, probably in his 40s, wearing a dirty jacket and ripped jeans. He had a strange, unsettling grin on his face as he walked toward me. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I seem to be having some car trouble," he said, gesturing to the far end of the lot where I could just make out the silhouette of a beat-up old van. "I was wondering if you might be able to give me a jump." Something about the man made my skin crawl. Maybe it was the way he was looking at me, his eyes roving up and down my body. Or maybe it was the fact that there wasn't another soul around for miles. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get in my car and drive away as fast as I could. I'm sorry, I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. But I really need to get going. I'm sure someone else will be along soon who can help you out. The man took another step closer, still smiling that eerie grin. Ah, come on now. It'll only take a minute. You wouldn't leave a guy stranded out here in the middle of the night, would you? I backed away slowly, fumbling behind me for the car door handle. I said no. Please, just leave me alone. The man's face darkened, and he lunged forward, grabbing my arm in a vice-like grip. I screamed and wrenched away, tumbling into my car and slamming the lock down. The man pounded on the window, his eyes wild with rage. "Open the door, you stupid bitch," he snarled, his spittle spraying the glass. I jammed the key into the ignition, praying the engine would start. It sputtered once, twice, then roared to life. I slammed it into reverse and stomped on the gas, the tires squealing as I peeled out of the parking spot. In my rearview mirror, I could see the man chasing after me, still shouting obscenities. I didn't stop driving until the sun started to peek over the horizon, too afraid to even glance in my mirrors. I still don't know what would have happened if I had gotten out to help him with his car that night. And to be honest, I don't want to know. All I know is that I'll never stop at a rest area by myself again, no matter how tired I am. Some risks just aren't worth taking. I had been driving for hours, the monotony of the highway broken only by the occasional exit sign or rest stop. It was late, close to midnight, and I was getting tired. My eyelids felt heavy and my head started to nod. I knew I needed to pull over soon before I became a hazard on the road. That's when I saw the sign for the next rest area, just a few miles ahead. I breathed a sigh of relief and flicked on my turn signal, eager to stretch my legs and maybe grab a quick nap in the car. As I pulled into the dimly lit parking lot, I noticed only a couple other vehicles scattered about. I chose a spot near the restroom building, figuring it would be safest to stay close to the light. As I stepped out of my car, the cool night air sent a shiver down my spine. The place had an eerie stillness to it, the kind of quiet that feels almost oppressive. I hurried into the restroom, the harsh fluorescent lights flickering overhead. It smelled of bleach and stale urine, but at least it seemed clean enough. I quickly did my business and splashed some water on my face at the sink, trying to wake myself up a bit. As I was drying my hands, I heard the restroom door creak open behind me. I glanced up into the mirror and saw a man enter wearing a dark hoodie with the hood pulled up, obscuring his face. Something about his presence made my skin crawl, and I suddenly felt very vulnerable. I kept my head down and brushed past him, eager to get back to my car. But as I pushed open the door to leave, I heard him speak. "Hey, you got a light?" His voice was low and raspy, sending a chill through me. "No, sorry," I mumbled, not even looking back as I let the door swing shut behind me. I practically jogged to my car, fumbling with my keys as I tried to unlock the door. That's when I heard the restroom door open again, and the sound of footsteps coming my way. My heart raced as I finally got my door open, and practically dove inside, slamming it shut and locking it in one motion. I sat there for a moment, trying to catch my breath, then cautiously peered out the window. The man was standing there, not 10 feet from my car, staring directly at me. He had his hands in his pockets and his hood still up, but I could see his eyes glinting in the dim light. He just stood there, unmoving, as if waiting for me to make the next move. I threw the car into reverse and peeled out of the parking spot, gravel spraying as my tires spun. In my rearview mirror, I could see the man still standing there, watching me as I sped away. It wasn't until I was miles down the road, heart still pounding, that I started to question what had just happened. Was the man just a creep looking to scare me? Or did I narrowly escape something far worse? All I know is that I'll never forget the feeling of pure dread that washed over me in that rest stop parking lot. And I'll definitely think twice before stopping at one alone in the middle of the night ever again. I pulled into the rest stop off I-95 somewhere in Virginia, my eyes heavy and burning from hours of driving. It was after midnight, and the parking lot was nearly empty. Just a couple of semis idling in the far corner, and one other car. I figured I'd grab a quick coffee from the vending machine, stretch my legs, and then push on through the night. As I stepped out of my car, the humid air hit me like a wet blanket. Cicadas buzzed in the trees, and the faint glow of the rest stoplights barely cut through the inky darkness. I made my way across the cracked pavement, the sound of my footsteps echoing too loudly in the stillness. The vending machines were in a little alcove off to the side of the main building. I fumbled in my pocket for change, the coins clinking as I fed them into the slot. As I waited for my coffee to dispense, I heard a shuffling noise behind me. Probably just another weary traveler, I thought. But then I felt it, that prickly sensation on the back of my neck, like I was being watched. I turned slowly, my heart starting to thud against my ribs. There was a man standing about 20 feet away, just on the edge of the shadows. He was wearing a dirty baseball cap, pulled low over his face, and a tattered army jacket, despite the heat. He didn't move, didn't say anything, just stood there staring at me. A chill ran down my spine. I grabbed my coffee and hurried back toward the parking lot, not daring to look back, but I could feel his eyes on me the whole way. I was almost to my car when I heard his voice, low and gravelly. "Hey, got a light?" Against my better judgment, I turned. He had followed me and was standing just a few feet away now. Up close, I could see his face was weathered and unshaven, his eyes bloodshot. He held out a cigarette expectantly. "Sorry, I don't smoke," I managed to say, my voice sounding thin and shaky. His expression darkened. "Come on, man. Help me out here." He took a step closer. I could smell the sour stench of alcohol and sweat. My hand shook as I fumbled for my keys. "I really don't have a lighter. Sorry." I unlocked my car and yanked the door open, desperate to put a barrier between us. "Don't be like that," he said, moving even closer. He was right beside me now, close enough to touch. I froze, my heart racing. Just then, the door to the rest stop swung open, and another man walked out. The guy accosting me glanced over, and in that split second of distraction, I jumped in my car and slammed the lock down. He banged on my window as I turned the key, the engine mercifully roaring to life. "Hey, I'm talking to you," he shouted, his face twisted in anger. I threw the car into reverse and peeled out of the space, gravel spraying. In my rearview mirror, I saw him standing there watching me, his lit cigarette glowing like a tiny ember in the darkness. I merged back onto the highway, my hands shaking on the wheel, my heart pounding. I drove for miles, too wired to feel tired anymore, replaying the encounter in my head. What if that other man hadn't come out when he did? What if my car hadn't started? I didn't stop driving until the sun came up, and even then, I only pulled over when the gas gauge was on empty, and there were plenty of other cars around. I still don't know what that guy wanted. Money? My car? Something worse? All I know is I've never been so glad to see the dawn break over the horizon and put that rest stop far behind me in the distance. It was late, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, and I was driving alone on a long stretch of highway through the middle of nowhere. I'd been on the road for hours, heading home from a work conference a few states away. My eyes were getting heavy, and I knew I needed to stop soon to rest. That's when I saw the sign for a 24-hour rest stop just ahead. I pulled off the empty highway and into the deserted parking lot. There were no other cars, just the dim glow of a few scattered lampposts. I grabbed my backpack from the passenger seat and headed inside the small brick building. The restroom was dingy but functional. I splashed some water on my face at the sink, trying to wake myself up a bit. As I dried my hands with a paper towel, I heard the creak of the door opening behind me. I glanced up into the mirror and saw a man enter. He was maybe in his 40s, wearing a dirty baseball cap and a worn flannel shirt. He nodded at me as he walked past into one of the stalls. I stepped out into the small lobby area with a few vending machines and tried to decide if I should get a coffee or just head back to my car to sleep for a bit. That's when I noticed the man's backpack, sitting on the floor near the restroom door. It looked a lot like mine. Same color, same brand. I didn't remember seeing him carrying it when he walked in. Shrugging it off, I fed some quarters into the coffee machine. As I waited for the cup to fill, I heard the restroom door creak open again. I turned, expecting to see the man come out, but no one was there. The door was ajar, slowly swinging back and forth. I felt a chill run through me. Something didn't feel right. Abandoning the coffee, I hurried to the front door and pulled. It was locked. I yanked harder, rattling the handle, but it wouldn't budge. From behind me, I heard the slow squeak of sneakers on the tile floor. I spun around to see the man standing there, now holding a large hunting knife that glinted under the fluorescent lights. "That's a nice backpack you've got there," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Looks just like mine. In fact, I think it is mine." He took a step toward me and I backed up against the locked door, my heart pounding. I looked desperately for another exit, but there was nowhere to go. The man cocked his head, studying me with cold eyes. "You know, it's not safe for a woman to be traveling alone at night. You never know what kind of dangerous folks you might run into at a place like this." He took another step, raising the knife. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. I was cornered, trapped, with no way to escape. As he lunged forward, the knife glinting in his hand, I squeezed my eyes shut and prayed that this was all just a terrible dream. But the pain that ripped through me a second later told me this nightmare was all too real. I pulled into the rest stop sometime after midnight, my eyelids heavy and my body aching from hours behind the wheel. The highway had been empty for miles, not another set of headlights in sight. I figured I could grab a quick nap in my car before getting back on the road. Just an hour or two to recharge. The rest area was dimly lit, with only a couple of flickering lamps illuminating the parking lot. I pulled into a spot near the restroom building, killed the engine, and reclined my seat back. The silence was almost eerie after the constant hum of the road. I closed my eyes and tried to settle in. A sudden tap on my window jolted me awake. I squinted, my heart racing, trying to make out the figure standing outside my door. It was a woman, her face obscured by stringy hair and the shadows of the night. She motioned for me to roll down my window. Hesitantly, I cracked it open an inch. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, her voice thin and reedy. "My car broke down a few miles back. My phone is dead. Could I possibly borrow yours to call for a tow?" Something about her story didn't sit right with me. Why was she out here all alone at this hour? Where was her car? I glanced around the empty lot, a knot forming in my stomach. "I'm sorry," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "I don't have my phone on me. But there's a gas station a few exits up. They might be able to help." Her face hardened, her eyes narrowing. "Please," she insisted, her fingers curling around the top of my barely open window. "It will only take a minute." I shook my head, my hand inching toward my keys, still dangling from the ignition. "I really can't. I'm sorry." For a moment, she just stared at me, unblinking. Then, slowly, she withdrew her hand and stepped back from my car. "Fine," she said, her voice flat. "Thanks for nothing." I watched as she turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows behind the restroom building. I released a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, my hands trembling against the steering wheel. I knew I should just get back on the highway, put as much distance between myself and this place as possible. But a part of me felt guilty. What if her story was true? What if she really did need help? I sat there for a few minutes, wrestling with indecision. Finally, I took a deep breath and got out of the car. The night air was cool against my skin as I walked toward the building, gravel crunching under my feet. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the vastness of the empty lot. "Ma'am, are you still here?" No response. I rounded the corner of the building, squinting into the darkness. That's when I saw it. Her car. It was parked behind the building, hidden from view of the road. But it wasn't broken down. The engine was running, headlights on, driver's side door hanging open. A chill ran down my spine. I turned to run back to my own car, but I froze. She was standing there, blocking my path. And she wasn't alone. 2 men emerged from the shadows behind her, their faces hard and expressionless. "I told you I needed to borrow your phone," she said, taking a step toward me. "You should have just helped me when I asked nicely." I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. My legs felt rooted to the spot, my entire body gripped by terror. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the glint of a knife in the moonlight and the sound of their footsteps drawing closer. It was late, close to midnight, and I was driving back from visiting my girlfriend a few towns over. We'd had a stupid argument, and I left in a huff, speeding off into the night. I knew these rural roads pretty well, but I'd never driven them this late before. Everything looks different in the dark. About an hour into the drive, I realized I was running low on gas. The fuel light blinked on, casting an eerie orange glow across the dashboard. I muttered a curse under my breath. I hadn't passed a gas station for miles, and I couldn't remember if there was one coming up anytime soon. Just as I was starting to worry, I saw a sign for a rest stop about a mile ahead. I breathed a sigh of relief. Even if they didn't have gas, at least I could stretch my legs and maybe find a vending machine. My stomach grumbled at the thought of a snack. I pulled into the rest stop, my headlights sweeping across the empty parking lot. It was deserted, not a single other car in sight. The building itself looked run down, with peeling paint and a flickering fluorescent light above the entrance. I hesitated for a moment, then shook my head. I was being silly. It was just a quiet night, that's all. I parked and got out, shivering as the cool night air hit my skin. I hurried toward the building, eager to get inside. The door creaked as I pushed it open, the sound echoing in the empty space. The bathroom was to my left, a small store to my right. I headed for the store first, hoping they might have some granola bars or something. The store was dimly lit and cramped, the shelves half empty. I grabbed a couple of snacks and a bottle of water and headed for the register. There was no one there. I frowned, looking around. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone here?" No response. Just the hum of the refrigerators and the buzz of the fluorescent lights. I shrugged and left a few bills on the counter, figuring I'd pay for my stuff even if no one was around to take my money. I was just about to leave when I heard a noise from the back of the store. A thud, like something heavy falling. I froze, my heart suddenly pounding. "Hello," I called again, my voice sounding thin and reedy to my own ears. "Is someone there?" Again, no answer. I told myself it was probably just a box falling off a shelf, or maybe a stray animal that had gotten inside. Nothing to worry about. But as I stood there straining my ears in the silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I turned to leave, my snacks forgotten. I just wanted to get back to my car and get out of there. But as I pushed open the door, I heard another sound. Footsteps, slow and heavy, coming from the darkness at the back of the store. And then a voice, low and rough. "Where do you think you're going?" I didn't wait to see who it was. I bolted, running for my car like my life depended on it. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the door open. I glanced back over my shoulder and saw a figure emerging from the store, walking toward me with purposeful strides. I finally got the door open and flung myself inside, locking it behind me. I jammed the key into the ignition, praying the engine would start. It coughed and sputtered, and for a horrifying moment I thought it wouldn't catch. But then, it roared to life and I peeled out of the parking lot, tires screeching. I didn't look back as I sped away, my heart jackhammering against my ribs. I didn't stop driving until I saw the lights of town, until I was sure I was safe. I never found out who that figure was, or what they wanted with me. And to be honest, I don't want to know. All I know is that I'll never stop at a deserted rest stop again, no matter how desperate I am. Some things are just better left alone. It was late, probably close to midnight, when I finally pulled into the rest stop off I-80 somewhere in the middle of Nebraska. I'd been driving for hours, trying to make it to Denver by morning, but exhaustion was setting in, and I knew I needed a break. The rest area was dimly lit, with only a couple of other cars parked in the lot. I figured I'd just close my eyes for a bit, maybe an hour or so, then get back on the road. I reclined my seat and tried to get comfortable. But something felt off. It was too quiet, almost unnaturally so. Usually, even at this hour, you'd hear the occasional truck rumbling by or the hum of vending machines. But there was nothing. Just a heavy stillness in the air. I was just starting to doze off when I heard a tap on my window. My eyes flew open and I sat up, heart pounding. A man was standing outside my car, his face obscured by the shadows. He motioned for me to roll down my window. Hesitantly, I cracked it just an inch. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sorry to bother you," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "My car broke down just up the road. I was wondering if you could give me a jump." Something about his tone made me uneasy. "I'm sorry," I said, "but I'm not really comfortable with that. Maybe you could call a tow truck?" He leaned in closer, and I could see his eyes glinting in the faint light. "Come on, it'll just take a minute. You'd really be helping me out." I hesitated, torn between wanting to help and the growing sense of unease in my gut. I don't think so. I'm sorry." His expression hardened, and he slammed his palm against my window. I jumped, my heart racing. "Fine," he spat. "Thanks for nothing." He stalked away, disappearing into the darkness. I sat there for a moment, trying to calm my nerves. It was just a strange encounter, I told myself. Nothing to get worked up about. But as I settled back into my seat, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The silence seemed to press in around me, suffocating. And then I heard it. A scraping sound, like metal on pavement, coming from somewhere behind my car. I sat up slowly, peering into my rearview mirror. At first, I couldn't see anything, but as my eyes adjusted, I noticed a shape crouched down near the back of my car. It was the man from before, and he was doing something to my license plate. Panic surged through me, and I fumbled for my keys, jamming them into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I threw the car into drive, my tires squealing as I peeled out of the rest stop. I glanced in my mirror as I accelerated onto the highway, half expecting to see him chasing after me. But there was nothing, just the rapidly receding lights of the rest area. I didn't slow down until I saw signs for the next town, some 40 miles away. It wasn't until I pulled into a brightly lit gas station that I dared to get out and look at the back of my car. My license plate was gone, the screws scattered on the pavement. In its place was a piece of paper, held on with a single piece of tape. With shaking hands, I peeled it off and unfolded it. Scrawled in messy handwriting were 5 words that turned my blood to ice. I'll see you in Denver. I pulled into the rest stop a little after midnight, my eyes heavy and my muscles aching from hours behind the wheel. The parking lot was empty except for a couple of semi-trucks idling in the back corner. I figured I'd grab a quick nap, hit the restroom, and be back on the road before dawn. I reclined my seat and closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Maybe it was the unfamiliar surroundings or the way the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, but I felt uneasy, like something wasn't quite right. After tossing and turning for a while, I gave up and decided to stretch my legs. The night air was cool and damp as I stepped out of the car. I zipped up my jacket and headed toward the restroom building, my footsteps echoing off the pavement. As I got closer, I noticed that the door was propped open with a trash can. That struck me as odd, but I didn't think much of it. I was just grateful I wouldn't have to touch the handle. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, the harsh fluorescent light making me squint. The restroom was empty and silent except for the steady drip of a leaky faucet. I walked over to the sink and splashed some cold water on my face, trying to wake myself up. That's when I heard it. A soft rustling sound coming from one of the stalls. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and weak. No response. Just that same rustling noise. I took a step toward the stall, my hand shaking as I reached for the door. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed it open. It was empty. I let out a sigh of relief and turned to leave, but something caught my eye. There, on the floor of the stall, was a crumpled piece of paper. I bent down to pick it up, my curiosity getting the better of me. It was a handwritten note, the ink smudged and the paper damp. I squinted to make out the words. "Don't trust the man in the blue jacket. He's not who he says he is." I felt a chill run down my spine. What did that mean? Who was the man in the blue jacket? I stuffed the note in my pocket and hurried out of the restroom, suddenly eager to get back on the road. As I approached my car, I noticed a figure leaning against the hood. It was a man, wearing a blue jacket. He straightened up as I got closer, a friendly smile on his face. "Car trouble?" he asked, his voice smooth and calm. I shook my head, my hand instinctively reaching for the note in my pocket. "No, I'm fine. Just taking a break." He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. "Mind if I join you? It's a long night, and I could use some company." Every instinct in my body screamed at me to say no, to get in my car and drive away as fast as I could. But there was something about his voice, his smile, that made me hesitate. "Sure," I heard myself saying, the words coming out before I could stop them. He walked around to the passenger side and climbed in, his movements fluid and graceful. I got behind the wheel, my hands shaking as I turned the key in the ignition. We pulled out of the rest stop and onto the highway, the dark road stretching out before us. We drove in silence for a while, the only sound the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. I could feel his eyes on me, watching my every move. Finally he spoke. "You know, I've been waiting for someone like you." I glanced over at him, my heart racing. "What do you mean?" He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Someone who's all alone. Someone who won't be missed." I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as the car skidded to a stop. I reached for the door handle, but he was faster. His hand clamped down on my wrist, his grip like iron. "Don't fight it," he whispered, his breath hot against my ear. "It'll all be over soon." And then everything went black.